I'm Sam.
Okay, thank you everybody. And trying to keep to time, we're going to start this next paper session now. This is paper session 3 about body and motion. And we're going to start with a talk remotely by Pasquale.
Hi everyone.
Thanks Pasquale, ready now?
Okay. Hi everyone. Hi, my name is Pasquale Mainolfi, and in this brief presentation, do you hear me? Yeah, everything is okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. In this brief presentation, I will introduce the work simulated the EEG-Driven audio information mapping using inner ear cell model and the spiking neural network. I will start with a brief presentation with a short introduction to set the context for the proposed approach. Then I will present the underlying architectures. And finally, I will show an example of real-time SEEG mappings. The goal of this work was to create a biologically inspired framework that replicates how sound is processed by the brain. To do this, I used a medicine inner ear cell model and the Izikevich spiking neural model. However, the main focus was to observe, not create, observe a cortical level processing dynamics and use the framework for audio information mapping rather than just task learning. A simulated EEG was chosen as a best approach to achieve this. Let me say something. I believe this topic is of fundamental importance. Shortly after my work, several seminal papers from Anthropic, Google, and others were published, highlighting how LLMs may exhibit a latent layer of thought, a kind of numerical consciousness. In a time when a human is becoming increasingly indistinguishable from data, when this is a field that art has a duty to explore. So the work came back to the work. The work is divided into 2 phases. The first addresses the implementation challenges, and the second focuses on the application. This presentation will cover only the first phase. There have been many contributions in the literature at the intersection of audio and neuroscience. It began with Audry in 1934, the first to translate EEG into audio. This was followed by Lucier's Music for Solo Performance and Rosenbaum, important experiment through the 1990s. More recently, researchers like Miranda, Sanyal, and Bellier have continued to explore this area, with Bellier notably reconstructing a Pink Floyd song from brain activity in 2023. In the realm of third-generation neural networks, one notable example is Liang and Zheng 2021 work, where they used a spiking neural network for music generation. However, there are no approaches in the current literature quite like one proposed in this study. As mentioned earlier, the proposed model consists of 3 complementary blocks in a temporal sequence. The first block encodes audio information at the cochlear level using the MEDIS model. The second simulates brain activity in response to the spike train from EAC model, through a spiking to a spike neural network. The third generates a simulated EEG analysis. And now examine each block in details. The MEDIS model is a probabilistic model of auditory transaction. It assumes that air cell contain three neurotransmitters that spill out from the synaptic cleft to a permeable membrane. The membrane permeability fluctuates in response to the sound stimulus, with the K in the slide, with the K representing the permeability oscillating between 0 and G. The equation describes a fascinating cycle where the cell has a warehouse of neurotransmitters. So when a sound stimulus arrives, a part of this store is released and then gradually refilled. The first equation in the middle, the first equation simulates the refilling process, the recovery of the used material, and the neurotransmitter release. The second equation ensures the neurotransmitter flow increases when released and decreases as material returns. The third equation shows that the signal strength rises when material is released and falls when it is recycled or degraded. Here, C represented the neurotransmitter release into synaptic space. The model, this is the important thing, the model generates a spike train with the likelihood of a neural impulse being higher as C increases. Essentially, the more neurotransmitter present, then the more likely a spike will be generated. The Izikevich model simulates cortical neuronal activity, offering a good balance between computational efficiency and the dynamics of the Hodgkin and Huxley models. It can reproduce a wide range of spike patterns using just two differential equations and 4 parameters. It is incredible. In the equations, V represent the membrane potential in millivolt. And when V exceeds a certain threshold, the neurons fire spike. U is a recovery variable acting as a brake to control V and prevent excessive firing. The first equation describes how V change over time, generating realistic behavior toward a nonlinear equation. The second equation shows how U evolves. When V is high, U increases, and when V is low, U decreases. After a spike, V is reset, and U is increased to slow down the neuron. EEG, electroencephalography, is a technique for recording electrical brain activity. It captures signals generated by neurons through electrodes placed on the scalp. The 10-20 system is a standardized method for electrode placement, where distances between electrodes are 10 or 20% of the skull length, measured at specific point. The process works by using conductive material to make contact with the skull. Each electrode measures the potential difference between 2 points, and the signal is then amplified and recorded. The entire process acts as an operator, encoding an audio buffer in n dimensions. Mathematically, the operation described earlier are adapted for this purpose. In block A, the first block, in the block A, a transduction takes place at the cochlear level, with the Y being an amplification factor to enhance the SNR ratio, signal to noise ratio. Block B processes the simulated electrical signal at the cochlear level, where the spike threshold is dynamic, adapting to the stimulus with beta regulating the network's sensitivity. Additionally, an unsupervised learning model based on STDP or spike time dependent plasticity adjusts synaptic weights based on the timing and on the timing of pre and post synaptic spikes. Connection strengthen when a presynaptic spike precedes a postsynaptic spike, and vice versa. The weight matrix is initialized with the distances between neurons. In the block C is shown the equation for capturing the electrical signal by an electrodes. Neurons are placed in a 3D spherical space with the coordinates uniformly distributed between 0 and 2 pi for azimuth, minus pi and plus pi for elevation, and a radius equal to the half of the average size of the human brain. Electrodes are positioned in a 3D space according to the 10-20 system. Each electrode measures the potential on the scalp, the fake scalp, obviously, by summing the contribution from each neuron weighted by distance, orientation, membrane potential, and proximity to neurons' input-output zones during discharge. A uniformly distributed noise term is added to simulate electrode noise. Here is how the neurons are distributed in the 3D space under safety condition, obviously. The electrodes are showing in red. This is simulation in Python. It is what a real-time EEG look like, recorded in my house. I implemented a test model in Python, and the output is incredible. The trace show the system response to the underlying sonic architectures. At this stage, no filter has been applied, and the input stimulus is the FFT of the captured sound. What is observed is a direct projection of the modeled synaptic activity, made visible in the form of simulated electrical potential, virtually recorded by the electrodes. The fluctuations of the acoustic stimulus are reflected in the trace with remarkable precision, highlighting how the system dynamically reacts to the structural change in the signal. Neural activation peaks correspond to more pronounced acoustic transition, while more stable portions of the signal generate attenuated responses. Distinct temporal pattern emerges, how you can see, shaping a synthetic neural map as a simplified yet information, dense electrophysiological rendering of the original sonic structure. The work presented here represents the first phase of the overall project. The second phase will delve into practical application, including the use of the SEEG in performative settings, sound synthesis, and performance engineering. Additionally, based on insights gained in this phase, further development will be required in areas such as selection criteria for framework parameters, targeted neuron placement, and other key considerations. That concludes the presentation for now, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pasquale, for your talk. I'm going to open up to some questions in the room. If anyone would like to ask a question, but I might start it off. So you mentioned in your paper some future work that you planned for this with the aim of concretely evaluating its effectiveness and versatility in real-world contexts, looking at some concrete applications and field experience. I wondered if you could just talk about that a little bit.
I think sorry for my English, but I think the first phase of this project was very difficult to make real, to create to build the framework. Because something was too hard to replicate this behavior. In the practical consideration, I think these frameworks can be very a very sorry, but my English is too bad, and I think the second phase will be more simply than the first phase, because the practical sorry, but I am very
It's no problem.
It is too hard for me to formulate my thoughts now, because because my English is not so good, and I think this complicates the things. So
sure, that's no problem. Thank you very much. Were there any other questions in the room? No? Okay, well, we might move on to the second talk. Thank you again, and I want everyone in the room to thank Pasquale for your time. It's a really great talk.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second talk in this session is titled Emma, Enhancing Real-Time Musical Expression Through Electromyographic Control. I'll be presented by João, who I believe might be joining us online.
Hello,
Yes.
Do you have sound?
We can hear you, yep. We're just waiting for the slide to come up in 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
We can see you and your slides now.
Okay, can I proceed? Okay.
Yes.
Hello, my name is João Coimbra. It's a pleasure to be here at NIME to present my ongoing PhD project, EMA, an electromyographic musical instrument for real-time embodied musical expression. I'm a performer and composer focusing on sound-based composition, real-time electronics, and acoustic instruments, such as the piano. Electromyography measures electrical signals that trigger musical movement. EMA uses the hand as a musical interface, focusing on precise finger mapping and real-time sound and spatialization. This was inspired by Aristotle's idea of the hand as the tool of tools, where each finger can act as a distant tool. EMA builds on past NIME research in EMG and EMI design. Its key contribution is offering nuanced expressive control of all 5 fingers through a fingerless glove, enabling unrestricted and natural performance. EMA has 2 main components, a fingerless glove and a wristband with 5 EMG sensors, an inertial measurement unit, Wi-Fi transmission, and a sound generation unit where EMG data is mapped to sound. Custom terminals have been developed to address placement challenges, allowing precise electrode anchoring on key points of the hand and forearm, minimizing crosstalk. The implementation process had 4 stages: sensor customization, anchorage on the hand and forearm, real-time signal processing, and sound mapping, all stages developed in Max MESP. A real-time feedback loop improves calibration and playability. EMA processes EMG in real time using waveform visualization, noise gating, filtering, and compression. Calibration is done for 2 poses, pianistic and aerial. It supports both discrete and continuous gesture control for each musical expression. EMA uses a modular fingerless glove and wristband, stabilizing sensors for the thumb, index, little finger, middle, and ring fingers. This design maintains tactile feedback and flexibility while securing sensor placement. Next, I will show you a video demonstrating some of the features described, which have been tested in EMA's first prototype. So through EMG to audio mapping, we captured finger nuanced movements with full expressive control. Custom terminals improved setup and sustainability. Next steps will be integrating machine learning, extended mapping to both hands, enhance sound mapping, and explore solo and ensemble performances and compositions. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Al. Are there any questions in the room? Otherwise, I might start off. Great. So I just wanted to ask, you've got control from each of the fingers measured through EMG. You've got some motion sensing in there. And that's a lot of parameters to map. How do you find when you're creating musical works with this? Do you focus in on a few of those parameters for each work, or do you often use all of them at once?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think it's going, as I said, this is going to be like a feedback loop, and the instrument will be acting like, for instance, a piano. Well, you don't have to play all the keys, or you can use the piano with felt, or adding some artifacts to it if you want. So I think I will use this regarding my compositional process, maybe using sometimes only some of the fingers, or I can be using like some fingers for triggering, and this finger, the thumb, to modulate the sounds that I be playing with this. So this is the kind of the Aristotle idea of the hand being different tools, because when you are playing the piano, you are using all 5 fingers for the same movements. You are not actually using all the possibilities of your fingers. And for instance, the thumb moves like this, not like this naturally. So yeah, I will be using EMG mainly to trigger the movements of my fingers, and I can modulate also with the inertial measurement unit. This can be used for changing sound parameters, or even to sound specialization, to put precise sounds in any part of the auditorium. It's something that I really want to explore. So I think each one of these technologies can be used in several ways.
Thanks. And just following up on that, do you envision you'll be playing another instrument at the same time, or this is enough parameters for you already to work with?
No, that's also a great question, because that's one of the main topics. Since it can be used as EMA can be used as a standalone instrument, or you can use it for augmentation of something that you already play. So you can use your knowledge on a specific instrument and add some timbral features or other things, like having layers of sound from the initial acoustic sound, or transforming. It's an array of possibilities that I think this instrument could do. Well, the main focus and the most difficult one at the beginning was to find the right places for the sensors. And I think one of the big things we did was having these sensors customized with, we find that we don't even need to use electrodes, which is great. So we just need some conductivity, so we don't need to have the electrodes, and we can minimize the placement of the sensors. So it was great because it's very good for minimizing also crosstalking, which is a big issue when you are dealing with electromyographic signals in your hand and forearm, because you have so many muscles, tendons, and stuff inside this part of the body.
Great. Thank you very much for that explanation. That was great.
Thank you so much.
Oh, there's one more question in the room. Just 1 second.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm thinking about the audience and how they'll be able to see the movements of your hands. Do you think about projecting your hands, or how do you plan on presenting sort of smaller, finer movements to someone who might be sitting in the back of the audience?
Well, I regard this like a regular performance, musical performance, in the sense that when you are playing, for instance, some gestural, any kind of gestural controller, one of the main reasons for constructing IMA in my artistic practice was to establishing the correlation between gesture and sound. I think for me personally is very important when you are in acting or performance on stage, that I think gestures really connects with the audience, even if they don't understand how the sound is being done. Like, for instance, you have a piano and people understand that is a mechanical object that that have sound, that kind of sound. With electronic instruments, you need to create that kind of bond with the audience. audience. So I think one of the possibilities to still have this kind of bond with the audience is to have gestures, and gesture signifies something to the audience, like you are doing that correlation of sound that I was talking about. So I will have some videos, artistic videos behind, and also maybe something with my hands, because I think that's going to be visible from the audience point of view in the concerts. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next talk now, but first I want everyone in the room to thank Sal again.
Thank you so much.
The next talk we have is titled Aquapella Gestural Interactions with Liquid Turbulence as Musical Expression. And I'll hand you over to João Lettang.
Thank you. Just going to make sure audio is good. Okay, I think we should be good. Sweet. Thank you, everyone. I'm João Lettang. I recently graduated from the University of Colorado Boulder with my master's, and I am extremely excited to present you all our work. This is the Aquapella, which is some research we did on an exploration of gestural interactions with liquid turbulence as musical expression. Just to overall just introduce you all to what the Aquapella is. So this is the instrument held in my hands, kind of in the bottom. It looks like an open bowl with a bunch of wires around it. But what's really going on is this is an octagonal container with 8 sides. Each side of the container has a water level sensor that reports the water level for that side of the container. And that information is being sent to Max MSP, as you can see on the left side of the screen. And there's also a static camera that's attached to the instrument where you can see any water movement in it. And overall, this is a good look at what the Aquapella is and what it can do. Just as an overview, it's a gestural instrument first, and it's totally handheld. Uses water's flow in order to be an audio-visual generator. It's also very reactive and kinesthetic. You can feel the weight of the water as you move this interface around, which makes it extremely unique. And the visuals from the flowing water give an augmentation to the visual experience, particularly when light is involved. To really talk about the instrument, I would love to take you back to what my original concept for this device was. And that was to have a stationary container, something that was just an installation that stayed put and was really just an aquarium with water and sensors on the side. I wanted people to be able to hear sound, water, look at water bounce off the side of the container and hear sound come from that side of the room is really what I wanted. And I was imagining it as a stationary container. And so I made this kind of like very low fidelity prototype with a plastic container, some cheap sensors, and a microcontroller. And it was like just something I hodgepodged together, and it ended up working pretty okay. But something I wasn't quite expecting happened. And instead of the instrument being totally stationary, my participants decided that they wanted to pick it up. And we actually found that this was far more interesting and engaging, kind of as a musical expression device. And we have a few other discoveries that came with it too. One also was just the fact that when you had light pointing at it, you were able to kind of see the different reflections and refractions that came off of water with a particular device. So this is kind of showing like the capillary waves that happen in water as light is shined through it. And so with kind of the original concept out of the way, I want to go into the design. We wanted to take what worked with the initial concept and iterate it and elevate it to a new level and do some research with it. This means that we wanted to take a close look at the sensors and the container and how all of the data acquisition worked, as well as develop more sounds for this unique interface. First, to just take a look at all the types of sensors. Now, there are a bajillion types of ways to sense different things about water. There are optics, ultrasonics, capacitance, conductance, and many other attributes of water that you can measure. However, almost all of these sensors are too large, too expensive, or didn't really have enough range to work with what we wanted to do. And so we actually ended up staying with the exact same water level sensor that I used in the prototype. These are extremely cheap. They are 50 cents, but they are easy to integrate. They have a small form factor, which worked for our handheld size. And they had a substantial analog range and were really easily, really responsive. So you could really see in real time what was happening. As for just talking about how these sensors sense, they essentially have a positive and negative terminal, and these exposed traces on the PCB allow for water to be sensed. And so in figure A, you can kind of see that there's no water. In figure B, it's halfway up the sensor. And figure C, it's all the way at the top of the sensor. And this sensor reports an analog value depending on whether the water is at the bottom or the top of the sensing area. We also found that the sensor worked totally fine, or at around the same depending on the area of the sensor. So it works in figure D where the water is askew as opposed to flat in comparison to the sensor. We also had some discoveries with the sensor. As with many other water-based electronic projects, water was sticking to the sensor. It would not actually it would report a false water level because a droplet of water was stuck onto the sensor. And the sensors also started to degrade from a sort of electrolysis over time. So we wouldn't want to leave the sensors in the water for a long period of time. What we found, though, is that if we sprayed the sensors with a silicon lubricant, that this would actually dramatically increase the lifetime of the sensors and decrease water from sticking, both of which were great. However, one last thing is that these sensors had inconsistent readings. This analog device is not extreminto robust, and therefore it was really good with relative water measurement, but not super good with absolute water measurement. I'll go into that more a little bit later. Now to just talk a little bit more about the iteration of the container. We had our first prototype of container, of course, which is a rectangular container, completely transparent. But it was a little large. And so we went actually with this old tortilla container as for our next iteration, just trying to change the actual shape of it to see what would happen. We found that swirling motions actually worked really well in a circular container. But we also found that the sensors wouldn't have their full range, and we lost what made the water in the previous container visually interesting. So then that's when we kind of combined the two into this octagonal container. We were scared, of course, though, because if this is a 3D printed container, and if you look up are 3D prints waterproof on the internet, it will usually tell you no. But we actually ended up having no problems with this particular 3D print. And with our print settings, we never had water leaking or anything. And so the fact that this was custom allowed us to actually design sleeves for the sensors and make everything fit perfectly. We doubled the amount of sensors from 4 to 8, which gave us a higher resolution of water flowing throughout the container. So this also let us add a camera mount so that people could see into the container of water and have a visual look at it. To go a little bit more into the design of the container, you can see that we have a mount for the Arduino. There's wire racks along the outside, and there's actually a lip to keep water from flowing out of the container. And so you can be a little more energetic when you're flowing water with this particular Aquapella because of that lip. To go into a little more detail about what the water looks like when it is moved around a container. Water obviously is pulled constantly by gravity and will henceforth flatten out in a tilted container. So as seen in the figure B, if you tilt the left side of the container up, the water will fill in the right side of the container until it remains flat. And this puts it about halfway up that water level sensor. And then same thing happens if you were to tilt it the other way and you tilt the right side of the container upwards, all of the water fills into a triangular shape and then is able to actually go to the top of that water level sensor. So these interactions with water, we more or less put into three categories. We put into, first of all, we have tilting, kind of is what we discussed in the last slide, where the container is tilted in one direction, likely in one of the octants. We also found this kind of circular swirling motion. And so water also has momentum that you can't quite control. But if you go along with the momentum and dance with it, you can actually induce this swirling motion. And a similar thing is true of reverberation. If you go along with the water's momentum and you reverberate back and forth linearly, you can cause a sort of reverberating motion. And those are kind of like the three basic types of motions we saw with participants and ourselves when using the Aquapella. Finally, or at least for this part, I want to talk a little bit about how we transferred this analog sensor data into sound. And so we have those pesky analog sensors. And so we wanted to have all our microcontroller do all the work in terms of turning that data into a linearized output in MIDI. So from taking our analog values to a MIDI 0 to 127. And so we wanted to calibrate that. To take a closer look in a block diagram sense, we have 8 water level sensors. They go into the 8 analog pins of the Arduino, and then we can calibrate those sensors into a linear curve. And so instead of having any jumbly messes, we can have the lowest and highest value calibrated and then linearly approximate where the rest of the sensor will sense. And then now that the Arduino has done that, it can output those values to MIDI from 0 to 127, and then you can see that in any sort of digital audio workspace. Just to give a short view of that, I also want to talk about how when you practically tilt the container, you'll notice that in our like over time graphs to the side there, that we see that the water usually hits 3 sensors at a time. Usually hits one sensor a little bit more than the other 2, but you can see that as one sensor fades in, the other ones fade out over time. All right, now for the fun part, I want to talk about sounds and visuals. We mostly used Pure Data or Max MSP for all of our soundscapes. We found that when we were working on the performance with the Aquapella, we essentially had access to like 8 faders controlled by water, which was pretty cool. And that the soundscapes that we found worked well, controlled pitch, frequency, filtering, magnitude, ambisonics, and lots of other things. Ambient sounds typically worked better for the Aquapella, but we'll see some rhythmic ones as well. And also any visuals we had kind of enhanced the experience. So first I want to talk about the octet. This is the simplest mapping we found with the Aquapella, where each sensor controls a synth, essentially, or the magnitude of one synthesizer. Thank you. To go into a more ambient sound, the ocean wind is one where it actually takes advantage of the randomness of water. And so you get a constantly randomized noise that kind of sounds like a wind or ocean. And you also can use the gyroscopic motion of the Aquapella in order to, say, have the sound come from the left side of the room and the right side of the room. And I finally want to show you our last sound, which is the ring modulator. My co-author, August Black, made this one, and he modulates his voice with the sensors of the Aquapella. And finally, I want to quickly show you, I had a friend of mine, Fu Lee, make this visual just to go ahead and show what is possible with a little augmentation of a visual that comes from the Aquapella. Just ways that you can enhance kind of the fluidity of the actual visual that you see. Okay, finally, I want to quickly go over the results before I run out of time. Our kind of core thesis in finding from this. Fluid and liquid really is uniquely tactile. The fact that it has momentum as a handheld interface makes it really interesting to use, because instead of like having something that you can't feel, it moves with you, and you can feel that as you move the sensors around. We also found that the Aquapella is really one of many conceivable ways to harness fluid in a held container as an interface for musical expression. I wish I had time to talk about it, but there are just so many different types of container shapes that would be fantastic to talk about. I'm going to skip over that. We kind of propose that the Aquapella kind of fits between the handheld gestural interface NIMEs and the water liquid instrument NIMEs, kind of in between both of these things. And that is kind of unique in that atmosphere. I want to quickly go over a couple thank yous. I would like to thank my co-author, August Black, for advising me. And without his guidance through this project, I would not be able to write this paper and wouldn't be here. I would like to give another shout out to Fu Lee for designing a visual for this presentation. I would like to thank CU Boulder and the CU Boulder Atlas Institute and the Department of Critical Media Practices. Without the support and cross-collaborative nature of these institutions, this project would not have been possible. And I would like to thank NIME for inviting me here, and you all for listening to my presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, John. I'm going to open up to the room for some questions.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to try these earplugs as a latency compensator. We'll see if I can talk. So that's really interesting, and it doesn't work. Oh, well. So much for that. You talk about this as being a turbulence-based instrument, and I think that's really promising. But when you look at how the sensors are operating, it's probably not really dealing with turbulence. It's really dealing with kind of static water levels that are changing relatively slowly. And what I'm wondering is, did you look at all of the kind of micro variation of those sensors? Because they're very simple, they're just analog sensors. And maybe if you were to amplify very small, higher frequency signals, rather than looking at the kind of overall range, you might discover other things about what the liquid is doing. Did you investigate that at all? And how the sensors behave at a kind of micro-temporal, micro-voltage level?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I looked into that very briefly. When I was initially working with these sensors, I found that they were very good at almost exaggerating micro movements, which was kind of interesting. And I think that's something to do with the capacitance of the sensors and things. I didn't end up using that for any performance aspect, mostly because of how much I didn't like these sensors. They ended up being unreliable to the point of like, if I jostled it a little bit, it would go up and down, but the amount it would go up and down would be very inconsistent between settings, essentially. I would love to, when thinking about this, make capacitive sensors that would be sensitive enough to pick up those kinds of micro movements, because I think that would be really interesting. Doing that as well as peak detection, I think would be both things that would help pick up what the turbulence is actually doing inside of the container. I think it is actually quite quick in terms of like large movements, but you're right that the sounds that I chose did not take advantage of micro movements. So thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is, did you try to use other liquid? I mean, not water.
Oh, other liquid. I did not.
I think the experience depends on which fluid is used, right?
Yes. If you're talking about the capacity, like the conductance of water is different than other liquids, right? And so using other liquids, and I talk about this a little bit more in the paper in the future work. enjoy thinking about things such as oil and things that wouldn't mix with something like water. That would provide kind of an interesting visual change, and also provide things like chemical changes. Water was easy because I can get it out of anywhere. And I think it would still work with any type of liquid, and particularly liquid that would be more interesting visually or more viscous or less viscous, right? I think all of those things would be really interesting. And while I didn't have time to check that out when writing this paper, I think they would be really interesting to mess with and use in future iterations.
Hi. Okay.
Yeah.
You made me forget my question. No, I haven't. The data. Whoa. I'm gonna close my eyes. The data from the sensors is very redundant because I mean you can see it in the visual, no? So obviously if you put 9 sensors and it's all capturing like a spiral, like you see that as like yeah, so the data from the sensor is very redundant. Like you have 10 sensors, or I don't know how many you have, like 8 sensors. But obviously everything that's happening in all of the sensors is like entangled. It's not like it's independent dimensions or something like that, no? Yeah. So if sensor 0 activates, then 1 will activate next, and then 3 if you're doing like a rotating motion. And I wonder how you use that compositionally, or if that was a problem, or something you would want to change. Like, were you just using the data from the sensor straight? Because yeah, the compositions one was oscillators. But yeah, I imagine that has possibilities for like spatial audio sort of stuff. Like, how are you leveraging that redundancy, or were you trying to, like, were you leveraging it, or were you trying to avoid it, or yeah?
Yeah, I think I understand your question. So you're asking about like having 8 sensors can feel redundant because multiple of them are going off at the same level at the same time. Is that?
Yeah, it's good that the information, like how they are capturing I imagine this as a sort of like multi-dimensional thing that's going on, no? So the watcher, I guess you could say, oh yeah, we're going to say it has 8 dimensions of movement. Well, I guess there's like 3 dimensions, 4 if you count time, whatever, of movement, and then you have 8 sensors, and obviously they are like one next to each other, so it's not like they're capturing those dimensions. They are just captured like one after the other. So there's redundancy in that information, and I was wondering how you're using that compositionally. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you mentioned, or when you originally asked the question, that I used it gyroscopically, like using that kind of information to tell tilt. Like you can use the average of all of the sensors, as well as using like what one of the sensors maximum is and where that is positionally, to give a rough gyroscopic sense of what direction of tilt that the Aquapella is in. So that's one way that I kind of used the redundancy of the information to my advantage. I think to me, the information didn't necessarily feel redundant. And I actually felt like the 4 sensor version didn't really have enough granularity for me to take full advantage of the movement of the water. And so that's why I kind of moved to an 8 sensor version, was because, now I can take more advantage of the water peaking at one sensor to the next and to the next. And that helped with that. I will say that one other thing I did want to take advantage of was the, I don't remember which one it is. Oh yeah, like the peak detection part of it. And I think that would be a way to perhaps more rhythmically change what's going on. And just another aspect of the sensors that I could change and see that, it hits this wall of the container. That's a peak there. And then having a rhythmic hit as soon as it hits the wall, I think is the exact kind of satisfying experience that I'd want from maybe the spiral motion, and not one that I could get with kind of the, I'll say, flowiness of my output currently.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, John. We're going to move on to the next talk now, but I want everyone in the room to thank John one more time. Okay, for the last talk of this session, we have a paper titled From Performance to Installation, How Interactive Reinforcement Learning Reframes the Roles of Performers and Audiences. And this will be presented by Danny Perreault.
Hey everyone, can you hear
we
me?
can hear you and see your slides. Thanks, Tony.
Great. So my name is actually Vincent Cusson. I'm a PhD student from Montreal, Université du Québec in Montreal. And we are really excited to present to you our project that is called Latent Space Public Space. So the title of the paper is From Performance to Installation, How Interactive Learning Reframe, Interactive Reinforcement Learning Reframe the Role of Performers and Audiences. I'm just trying to put my window where it should be on my screen. There you go. All right. We are the MX Lab, the research group on media creation beyond the human. So our research is dedicated to understanding the media research creation processes involving non-human. Stuff like algorithm, robots, image, sound, light, etc., etc. And the co-director of the lab, Sofian Audry, has written this book in 2021 called Art in the Age of Machine Learning. And so this is what most of our work is about. The project we're presenting today is part of a larger research creation project called Reshape. It's titled Reshaping Real-Time Digital Art Practices with Reinforcement Learning Technologies. And it's a reflective and ethnographic research creation study. And we explored three domains, the virtual reality one, robotics, and the audiovisual performance. And so what we are interested in is to see what we can learn from experimenting in this different field and what can kind of be applied in the other field. So the overall transferability of the skills and understanding that we would develop on these technologies. And so obviously today I'm going to be mostly talking about the audiovisual performance. So just as a really quick kind of overview, as I said, we are assuming a research creation methodology with a lot of reflective practices, so that could be seen as auto-ethnography, but also we do cross validity with also external ethnography from collaborators. And so the view of the inside versus the view of the outside is meant to be, again, to observe the reinforcement learning transferability potential between the three fields. So what I'm going to be presenting today is actually our work that has been formed in three stages, so three iterations of the work, and again looking at how the work evolves over time in the different framing is also of interest for us. So we start by like discovering and exploring the project called Co-Explorer, which has been developed by Hugo Surteau and colleagues, mostly at IRCAM in the ESMM team. And so it's a framework that allows to use reinforcement learning in artistic setting. Basically, it's a feature like a latent space explorer where the agent can control many parameters that can be mapped to any variable, any audio or in our case audio video parameters, and thus would be moving around the space, the parametric space, and we would be able, the user is able to give some thumbs up, thumbs down, in the sense that, oh yeah, I like what you're kind of presenting me right now. Please continue working in this specific zone. On the other end, if you were to tell the system, oh, you know what, that's maybe not totally it, well, it would try and go further to explore more maybe interesting place in our parametric space. So again, we did a porting. So it was integrated in Max MSP system. We first poured the system into a Max for Live device to use directly into Ableton Live, and also we had a communication bridge made to talk to Touch Designer, a visual software for visual. And so again, just putting the emphasis on the idea that all those parameters that the agents control is up to what we want to explore with in terms of the audio and visual relationship. So again, I'll be trying to present three case studies that we had. First one being the kind of the original jam, the first hands-on with the system, which led after some experimentation to an installation in a public setting. This part of the project is called Trempe, and as a third iteration, in the end, we ported it into a smaller scale in an art gallery showcase. And so they are really three different exploration, and we cannot see the art gallery exposition as some form of final form. They're all iteration, allowing us to try different things. So the first jam has been made by the two first author of the paper, so Dany Perreault and Victor Drouin-Trempe. So they installed, in our laboratory, computers, speakers, projector, MIDI controllers, and everything you need to be able to jam with the audiovisual in audiovisual setting. And I really use the word jam, and we kind of assume again this jam methodology where at first it's just about like getting in, trying stuff. And see where it leads us without maybe thinking too much about it at first. But obviously this stage was also about understanding the whole stack, like the installation and configuration process happened there. And so a really interesting first part. And while performing, with it, while playing with it, it led to this idea of maybe we could, give a bit of those control that we have right now with our own MIDI controller in our own lab. Maybe we could present this project to a larger public, and maybe give the public a bit of these, as I said, thumbs down and thumbs up feedback to the agent. And so the Trempe project was born. So they presented it in a art festival. So I think you can see on the screen in the video the scale of the thing. So it was the festival gave we had access to those big round surface to project on, and we had a multi speaker setup to have really kind of an immersive setup where public would roam in the middle of the scenography, and as you see in the bottom, we had this pedestal, this box with the plus or minus button to give feedback to the agent, and also we had this star button that you can see that meant to be kind of a big jump, a big leap toward another region of our parametric space. So it would really affect what is going on in terms of the audio and the video at the moment to give some, let's say, a new start and to try and explore different things. And so in the long run, because the installation ran for more than 3 days with more than 6 hours per day, we think that all the feedback that have been given kind of really reflect the taste of the participant, and the audiovisual result in the end reflect all the feedback given by all the participants, which means that it kind of really kind of in accumulation. But a small caveat of the problem was that in this public setting with a lot of families, a lot of kids, we found out that the buttons were kind of really appealing, and so we received so many feedback, there was really kind of button jamming, and so we realized that maybe there was an issue in terms of what was actually kind of given as the feedback to the agent in terms of the relationship, the meaning behind all these feedback. And so this is what led. What?
1 minute.
Sorry? Yeah, okay. So this is what led to the showcase in the art gallery, where we decided to first update the interface. So we now had this iPad with all the parameters showcased as a slider, and also the opportunity to toggle on and off the effects of the agents on any of those settings. And so again, we aim for the public to have a bit less distraction, maybe more time to engage with the agents, and make the agent role clearer. And so our kind of main takeaways is that during these 3 iterations, we see the roles of all of us kind of to change, where in classical audiovisual performance, the composer or designer would be a human and would mostly kind of present a work that is kind of already done and sometimes perform on stage with the audience just receiving it. But with the use of the co-explorer, so with the reinforcement learning agent, the composer designer kind of mostly meta-create the world, the sonic and video world where we can explore. The exploration is kind of made by the co-explorer, who's kind of the new performer, and the audience so it is kind of becoming a meta performer that help the performer kind of work toward creative output. So that is the Reshape project, the audiovisual part of the Reshape project, and we are like helped by the Research Council of Canada and UQAM and Hexagram universities and research centers. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victor, for that presentation. That was really interesting. I'd like to open up to anyone in the audience might have some questions.
Does it work? Yeah. Thanks for your talk. I'm really interested if you could say a bit about what your participants have described the experience of the balance of agency between themselves and the reinforcement learning agents. Is it a kind of entangled relationship? Do they feel like they're in control, or are they subservient to the machine?
So that's really interesting. So we did not, at least yet, publish on any kind of observation that we made, especially with the external public, especially the one in the public space. But what is super interesting is that for sure these comprehension and these overall representation that we I mean the public have from the system have really varied in the 3 setups, and so. Again, I think it's kind of obvious that the one-to-one relationship, trying to really understand what the agent is doing, was really more abstract in the public space because also of the scale of the thing, because we are used, again, it's about framing also how you present the work to the one getting in. But I think in the first jam, we had a lot of weeks to really kind of also reflect about all of this. As I said, we are kind of using an auto-ethnographic method. So we've been writing on our own kind of ressenti and understanding of the thing. And in the museum gallery exposition, we had a card, like a text, really kind of expressing a bit more in detail what could be going on. And so we had some better return from the public in the sense that they felt that something, especially with the new interface, you know, they felt that they were really kind of interacting with something. But our goal, again, is not necessarily to frame it only as like you are performing with AI. I think the question of framing is an interesting one that we will continue to work on.
Thank you.
Okay, there's maybe time for one more question and then we'll close out. I think this one was first.
Hey, thanks so much for the presentation. So I understand with reinforcement learning, the design of like the reward functioning is quite important. And in this musical system, you have like the thumbs up, thumbs down, or do something completely different. And for musical feedback, that's relatively limited. I'm wondering if there's potentially option to give more detailed feedback, or how does that compare to, say, like robotics, reward functions, and or different fields?
I try my best to condense everything in 10 minutes, but we do address a bit more of that in the paper. And I think overall in our lab, the past research we've did with our system, it's touching upon some kind of paradox, because as you said, in classic reinforcement learning, we have this maybe more this clearer kind of goal and the evaluation of where we are towards this goal. And also it's about doing it as fast as possible, so there can be like a million of iteration to try and go toward it. When you are jamming with an agent and the reward you give is every 30 seconds, if you're really lucky during the whole 3 hours of jam, maybe you gave it, less than 100 thumbs up, thumb down kind of feedback. So it's again working a bit on this paradox and misusing in a sense this the way we can maybe think more generally about reinforcement learning. But it's also interesting because giving the sense of, oh yeah, I do like what you're proposing me versus, oh, I think that's not totally that, is already kind of an interesting way to interact with a software, with a creative agent. And so a lot of other systems with musical agent, for example, don't yet involve some of these more direct or more artistically, let's say, meaningful form of interaction. So for sure, it's a different use of classical reinforcement learning. It's also interactive reinforcement learning with a human in the loop. But that's kind of again a part that we cover a bit more in the paper. But interesting question for sure.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we're going to close the session now to try to keep to time. Thank you very much, Victor. I'd like everyone in the room to thank Victor and all the presenters in this session.
Thank you. Yay, day one. It's not finished yet, sorry. We have 2 exciting concerts coming up tonight. I think the first one starts at 7, so feel free to grab food around, talk, and then come back for the concert. The first one is here in the drama theatre, and I think the second one is at the School of Music, if I'm correct. Yes, great, thank you. And can I just kindly ask the poster presenters here today, you're happy to leave your poster here, but by 8 a.m. tomorrow, we're going to give the space to the poster presenter tomorrow. So it'd be great, if you want to keep it, please take it down. Yeah, otherwise, we're going to do that for you. Thank you for your cooperation. Great.